Hey guys, so today I thought I would talk about how I learned to compose for my video game. So, music was definitely the one thing that I hadn't touched on game development before starting to make games at all. It wasn't something I thought I would, but I'm kind of a greedy creative and I love to learn a little bit of everything. And music happened to be one of those things that eventually I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a bit of a go. I'm going to put a disclaimer here that this is pretty much for people that are new to composing. I am a baby musician. I'm basically like a 13-year-old with their first guitar. So I won't know any of the fancy musician terms. I won't know any of the fancy language for the most part. But I'm going to be talking about what I did in order to learn to go from this little piece thingy here to this. In like about a year, really, that I've been more seriously composing on and off. So, the first thing I would really recommend doing is actually looking into, well, first of all, looking into what you want to make the music with. So, I am using Fruity Loops Studio, um, and you can start off with a much smaller monetary investment and, get more into the money side of things as things go, because you're probably not going to need too much to begin with. You can probably even start off with like a trial version. In fact, it's probably a good idea to use a trial version of a couple of tools to see what you like and see what feels more natural, and to follow a few tutorials during that time to actually get used to how to use the digital audio workstation. But once you have the tool that you're going to be using, the main tool, the actual workstation that you're going to be composing music in, and you're comfortable with laying patterns down and basic things like that, I would recommend looking into a basic composition course. So I followed one on Udemy that was based around piano composing, and I basically did a lot of that on my keyboard because I didn't have a MIDI controller when I started out. And then about halfway through the course, I got a MIDI controller, and that helped greatly. This is my MIDI controller. It's the Korg Micro Key 32, I think. And it's small and compact, and it works perfectly for all of my needs, really. But yeah, I would recommend finding a small course. You can probably find a lot of tutorials on YouTube even for composing. If you know the genre you want to go into, you can get even more specific with that. I just wanted something that was generally how to compose, how to layer instruments, that kind of thing. And something with a bit of music theory involved as well, because I had no knowledge of any music theory. And then, of course, like the thing with music theory is that it's just a set of rules that is generally how we like to listen to things. So once you get a rough idea of how that works and you get a rough idea of how to put together sounds, you don't have to sit there analyzing how everything works either. You'll get a little bit more comfortable with a feeling for it. Like melodies, for example, are sort of just like based on our expectations. So if you have three different notes, your mind will probably start to think and expect of what the fourth note might be. So expanding your repertoire of like what you expect might be the next note, or thinking on for the feeling you're going for what the next note must be, helps a lot with melodies. And a lot of music is kind of just down to that thing of feeling it out, but it's really good to have a set of rules for how to feel it out when you're starting. And something else I did, as I was going through that course and learning new rules and wanting to apply those rules, but also after that, when I was actually trying to compose and trying to make music and not quite ending up with things I wanted to, is I would make a bunch of tiny, tiny loops. So I have probably about 100 different little tiny loops of music that I've made, that some of them are good, some of them aren't. If I liked something, then I would save it. If I didn't, I might save it anyways. It depends on if I found it of value. But if you end up with something that you think, oh, there's a bit of that instrument there that I like or something, you can always save it, name it in some kind of way that you can reference back to it and think, oh yeah, that has that kind of feeling to it. And then maybe later on you will actually find a use for that loop as well. But it's also a really good way of learning without having the whole attachment of having to make an entire song. And then if you have a loop that you really like and you want to expand on, then you can expand on that at that point. And it gives you a really great starting point where you can start to think, okay, how can I branch out with this? Finding virtual instruments that inspire you is also a really great help. My favorite instruments at the moment are Audiolatri's instruments. They just have such a big array of wonderful instruments that are super cheap and they're super great. So I might spend €10 on an instrument, and that instrument might have 30 or 70 instruments inside that one instrument. So I get a lot of use out of a single instrument, and I think I've probably bought all of their instruments by now. And it's much easier when you have a few instruments that you really like the sound of to go back to those instruments and to think, oh, do you know what? This inspires me. This makes me think of this kind of feeling I'm going for. It's really easy to pair that up then if you have a MIDI controller, to just go for a random instrument, try and play a few notes, and to think upon what that could work for. And something I've been really incorporating recently, especially since trying to do battle themes, is listening to more music. So listen to the music that you want to make, the kind of music you want to make. And especially listen to how they layer sounds, because something that really baffled me was how do songs layer. I think it's much easier to start off and to make melodies and the like, but it gets really tricky when it comes to making a full piece. But if you actually pay attention to how different songs layer themselves and you try to separate the instruments in your mind, then it teaches you a lot about how to actually layer music in your own songs and different techniques that songs actually do. And then you can apply those techniques to your own songs. So I hope those tips and tricks were useful for you. I'm still in what I would count as the baby musician stage, but I know I wasn't sure where to start out when I was looking into making music. A lot of musicians have the recommendation of just make music, which is a good recommendation, but it's hard to know exactly where to start with that. So I hope this was somewhat helpful, and I hope I will see you again soon.